What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki, and as you already know, it's time for the page by page for MHA Chapter 300. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you haven't, welcome aboard. Let's get right into it, though. So, open up the chapter, instant narration. We get a callback to various villains that we've actually seen throughout the series. We start talking immediately about how urban areas like the city are just overrun with people being criminals, especially because you can see in the outline, you can see Stain, you can see Muscular at the front, you can see Moonfish. One of the coolest thing about this for me is that the random pink muscly dude that All Might beat on his way to work in the USJ is included in the spread shot of villains who escaped. So that's Horikoshi maintaining that consistency, something that I love to see. We find out that the existence of the Nomu and the rumors that Hawks talked about were real things that people had been discussing, not just bait to get Endeavor. So that's kind of a cool thing to know that that wasn't just misinformation and random bull. We cover the fact that once people found out about the Nomu, it really kind of just messed everything up. They're like, nah, this is literally too much. They can't deal with having like monsters out there in the world. They now know for sure that these undead, multi-quirk, regenerating for a lot of them, mutants, monsters exist and can pull up at any moment. They've gotten hard confirmation. Which means they must have gotten some video cam footage of the Nomu running away, plus footage from all the prison breaks. We see the return of the Cider House gang, and needless to say, like, one, I love the fact that this is one of the few times we got to keep the editor notes, and it mentions how he was locked up. But two, we get a shout out to Sakamoto days with the civilian pulling up with a weapon. So we get the confirmation that, as like we've talked about on previous chapter reviews and Church of MHA streams, that the good guy with the gun is gonna pull up and he's gonna think he's gonna save the day. And we get a big spread of multiple people with different support course items pulling up to fight the Cider House gang. And we finally get some Wash, like actually doing hero work beyond just the scope of Wash pulling up and yelling Wash. The battles, the main takeaway from those battles is honestly that civilians using these weapons clearly isn't the optimal way for this to be handled, because there's buildings left and right all destroyed, and it looks like everybody's either unconscious or dead that was in the battle, plus collateral damage of civilians who weren't in the battle. One of the things that's important to remember is that Wash was very much known as the commercial hero. So even as Wash is running up, they like Wash, Wash. Once they get hit with the caster on Skillet and people start yelling at them about the collateral damage, that the whole thing drops, and Wash actually is like, let's disinfect wounds, let's just take care of business. So the fact that Wash is fully capable of dropping that shtick, even though like all the way up until now, Wash has been kind of painted as a character that's very much oriented around the commercialism and the brand, is a nice touch. But then we cut to Yoroi Musha, who showcases that that a lot of what he was doing was like a false bravado. During the Billboard chart, he talks about how, it's just a reflection of the times outside of the top three. All these like little things about, he trains Mina and Aoyama and Hagakure. So yes, thank you for that. But in general, he talks about how he needs to fall on his sword. And it looks like he's one of the people who didn't even get injured heavily during the war. So he's not only a person who managed to avoid the path of Makia, clearly, but also the fact that he doesn't seem to be that injured might suggest that he could have fled the battlefield. I might be being a little harsh on him, though, but we'll see. But also, he's kind of exposed as a fake hero because he straight up says all I ever wanted was love and respect, which basically means that, yes, he could have retired, but he literally kept going because he couldn't get enough of the attention. And I really love the fact that we get to see Stain again this chapter, and that he swam from Tartarus, because as he's walking, you can see the splishes and all these other things at his feet. So Stain was at Tartarus, saw Shigaraki there, and was like, nope, nuh-uh, I don't like you, and swam off and went and found one of his old bases. So that's the stamina feat for Stain. Like, he really is a high-tier character. But we also got to discuss the fact that a lot of heroes, like not just the one that Uraraka saw, have started to retire, step down. We had gotten some discussions of this in the previous chapter with Best Genist, where he was talking about assigning sidekicks to an area, and now we're getting confirmation even more so that people are literally leaving from top 10, etc. Like some people don't value Yoroi Musha stepping down, but I think that just kind of comes into contextualization. Yoroi Musha, one of the top 10 heroes, at any point being like, I quit because of a big disaster, is horrible for country morale. It's like the idea, like if you could imagine, like, I don't know, just like imagine like a terrorist attack happening, and then your government officials and like a bunch of police officers being like, yeah, we quit. And you're like, wait, what? And especially imagine like if Protect and Serve was still on all the vehicles because that's been removed. But like imagine if that was still there, and you got to see that, and you were like, okay, but that lack of protection that you swore, and then these people are famous across the country for providing that safety. So there's the sociological implications here. One of the things that I will say is that I'm starting to think that people don't realize how focused this is on social commentary. And I got to be honest, if you're reading My Hero Academia just for fights, you're probably in for a rough spot, or just to see really cool moments, because this is a society drama. That's what we'll call it. But speaking of society drama and drama in general, we segue into, after covering all these heroes, Endeavor specifically, where in the same way that you see that sign that says I am not here on the All Might statue, and people kind of putting that resentment towards him, showing those short memories, because just last August was the Camino incident, which means like the last stand of All Might wasn't even a full year ago, and they've already thrown him away and have decided to like resent him for these terrible events that are beyond the scope of him. And while yes, he may have enabled a bunch of complacency, they haven't put that connection together. It's not like society is out here like, All Might specifically was so influential that everybody got complacent and they didn't know what to do, so then they started emulating Endeavor to try their best, but now they've given up. That's not the conversation people are having. They're just mad at him because he's the number one hero. And because they want to know about his family abuse drama. And it's crazy to think that throughout all of this, that's going to be one of the biggest things they want to know about, is whether or not his kids are beaten, etc. And yeah, it's great to have this dialogue, actually, like to see these consequences play out in real time. But it's also just a wonderful highlight of how people will sooner get invested in like someone's personal drama than focus on the actual ramifications to their society, what's going on around them. Because on some level, I think it's just easier to worry about the drama than to deal with all the other nonsense that's going on in the world around you. So we get the next Mario doctor telling Endeavor that he's fine. That most of the people are mostly out of the woods, which I think that's an intentionally nebulous phrase. So we'll see what happens with Gran Torino there, especially because I really don't want him to live. And Endeavor is sitting there talking about how he knows that Toya should have known he'd live. And I think that's important to note because he technically was unconscious when Toya decided, oh, he's not going to be able to see me kill Shoto, then I don't need to keep doing anything. Whatever, I don't care. I'll see him again at a later date. And then they flew off to compress. So what's interesting, though, also is that the flashback we get of Endeavor and Toya in this particular one is Toya pulling his hair out distraught, but it doesn't look like Toya after a beating. It looks like Toya's upset and yelling at him about something that he wants or something like that. And so there's a certain level of, I think it went from, in my personal opinion and speculation, I think the training started to get physically bad. Shoto was born, and effectively Endeavor, though he might not have meant it this way, realistically told Toya directly that his body was not compatible with being a hero, and that he couldn't become one because of the way his quirk damaged his body, and that he was just going to focus on training Shoto. Because Endeavor wasn't actually on the mountaintop when Dabi was training as a child and ended up, dying. So there's a certain level of, there may have been a genuine disconnect where Endeavor might have thought, oh, well, like, it's fine, you are damaged, and then he might have just gone to the neglectful route after originally being abusive. So I think that there's a bit of a, Toya was struggling with the training, and it was deteriorating his health to the point that his hair turned white. Endeavor decided to stop training him which would have gotten him to also stop being physically abused. However, in the process, Endeavor didn't realize that it's not an all or nothing relationship where you are either getting all of my attention and being trained by me and also dealing with abuse and all my frustrations, or you get to be completely ignored, where there's a ground where you are supposed to put your kids, where you treat them well and value them, even if they don't do or have all the same talents and abilities as the other ones. That's just something that Endeavor really didn't learn. Cool thing about this, though, is that mid-breakdown, Shoto comes into his hospital room, and he's about to say dad when he immediately notices that Endeavor's crying. The cool thing about this, though, is that it would make that the first words that we would have heard out of Shoto's mouth before since Toya, seeing Toya and fighting him, would have been the words dad, like him acknowledging Endeavor as his father, something that he hadn't been doing for a really long time, and seeing like he's just fully made it to that point where he can call him dad, and was, or at the very least, was more concerned about his well-being than his grudge. Shoto, or rather Endeavor yelling Shoto in classic Endeavor fashion, as Sayas puts it, it's wonderful to know that even on his very injured bed, he's more than willing and able and desiring to embarrass his son with his antics. We finally get a full-on Endeavor straight up saying, nothing I ever do will be enough. And it's interesting to me because he was like, I already know I can't like become like, oh, I'm a magically better person. But I don't think he ever, it's obvious that he felt bad about everything that happened, but really having to see Toya with this new perspective, reopening that wound, finally really made him feel everything properly, where the weight of all of the guilt is rightfully crushing him. And he said Endeavor died. One of the things that we discussed is once you get to the last page or last spread, Ray pops up finally, and she's like, what about your heart? You don't, like, everything you feel, all these negative like emotions, we've all had to carry the weight of that far longer than you have, because you didn't realize that it was there. And so she's like, it's time to talk about Toya, and it's time to talk about the family. And what I love about this is the idea of Ray not only being out of the hospital, like it was foreshadowed, I believe, during Endeavor Agency or a little bit before that with that letter, but her being active, approaching Endeavor, not only as like not being coy, but showing that she not only is willing to see him, but rather is willing to move forward and approach him. As we talked about, she's definitely moving fast. Her hair is swishing like she's kind of hero. And more than anything, it seems like she either will push Endeavor to keep being a hero despite what's going to be an inevitable fall in popularity and an increase in resentment, because that's who he's always been. And if he's going to really atone and he's going to make it right for people around the world, then he has to not only keep doing what's right by his family, even if they never acknowledge him in person again, but he also needs to keep doing the right thing in society. But you could also have this be the conversation where it's just like, no, nothing you do will ever be enough. And I understand that you want to feel bad about this, but everyone else is more harmed. And you could have it be where this is the you are officially cut off Inji Todoroki conversation, which I think definitely opens up, once again, as somebody mentioned, though really dark, would be potential a suicide line. And the only reason why I even will entertain the notion that Endeavor could end up being that person is because of the fact that we've had the mention of the vinegar suicide incident during the story, back during the overhaul arc, where a kid apparently was going to jump. The kid who got caught in the river turned the river into vinegar because after he jumped to commit suicide, which is why, even though it's not always phrased that well in like some of the subtitling I've seen, the parent, they say straight up the kid's home life was responsible for the incident, where he was basically like really upset and was going to like go ahead and off himself. And then you have La Brava, after she got rejected in middle school, also talking about how she would want to kill herself. She almost killed herself. So to me, there's almost a bit of a Chekhov's gun floating around here with suicide. So I don't know if that's something that Horikoshi wants us to just think about, or he just was using that to highlight that people do get messed up by situations in life. I don't know. But a lot of like, for example, parent structure psychology always pays off in My Hero Academia. So it would be seem more consistent for me to have that suicide come in at some point, especially with Japan being a country that does have high suicide rate and did see an increase during 2020's pandemic. So it's a very relevant topic, and I think even just the way that this cancellation is going on is very relevant to how our world functions. And just overall, I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to come of this. Um, like I mentioned, the reason why we had to get the Hawks backstory and see what was going on from that perspective was so that we could see the perspectives of everybody, people who Endeavor have hurt, helped, and people who Endeavor have hurt. And no matter what Hawks wants to help Endeavor, but no matter what here, the people who have hurt are the ones who are right here, right now, and they're finally about to have this conversation. And we're getting Endeavor's perspective on himself while we're getting theirs. So that's what we're at right now. And yeah. So if you guys like anything I have to say, make sure you like, subscribe, or share, join, whatever. You guys just have a wonderful day. You can see me next week for the chapter review or for the Church of MHA. Anyone that you want to do. All right. This has been Aniki. I'm out.